All right, in the audience today, we do have Kirby and Bentley. Tens of thousands of people are human trafficked each year in the United States. But what if I told you the 5th largest state that's involved hits a little too close to home? That's right, sexual human trafficking is becoming an increasing problem in the United States, but specifically Ohio. Ohio is in fact the 5th largest state that's involved in human trafficking, with Toledo being the 4th largest city. But why Toledo? According to the Ohio Attorney General, Toledo has large transient and immigrant populations, 5 major highways with easy access to other states and Canada, and large urban centers and rural counties. According to the Ohio Attorney General's annual report in 2019, Ohio alone had 307 total victims, with 305 potential victims. Of those victims, 280 were female, 27 were male. There were also a couple different age ranges that were affected with this. 15 years and under had 30 victims. 16 to 17 years had 26 victims. 18 to 20, 40 victims. 21 to 29, 104 victims. 30 to 40 years had 74 victims. 51 to 59 years old had 25 victims. There are no victims reported for 60 and older. Also, a couple of races were in the statistics as well. 203 of those victims were white, 82 of the victims were African American, 14 were Asian, none were American Indian, and there were 6 reported unknown races. But what makes somebody vulnerable to being human trafficked? According to British Columbia's article titled "What Makes Someone Vulnerable to Human Trafficking," there are 7 major things. 1, poverty. Traffickers seek out vulnerable individuals and give them a false sense of hope, like food and shelter, to lure them in. Also, substance abuse is huge with being vulnerable for human trafficking. Again, traffickers often use somebody's vulnerable state. They know what they're addicted to, and they keep supplying those drugs to keep them lured in. Runaways are a huge risk factor as well. Just like everything else with poverty and substance abuse, they're vulnerable individuals. They use that against them and have food and shelter to keep them in place and keep quiet. Also, as we see in the Ohio Annual Report, gender plays a huge role. Women are subject more than men to human trafficking. Mental health also plays a liability issue as well. People who have mental health have a limited ability to assess risk factors and ill intentions, so traffickers use that against them. Gang involvement is huge in human trafficking. The exploitation of men, women, and children proves to be a less risky trade than drugs and weapons. Also, it's extremely lucrative for these gang members. So, why human trafficking? The top organizations that are usually part of human trafficking are gang members. Like we said in the previous slide, it's less of a liability to trade women and men and children than it is money, drugs, and weapons. And unfortunately, this is extremely lucrative to them. According to Stephanie Hepburn's Hidden in Plain Sight article, trafficker victims are made to make a $500 a night quota. That means traffickers can make up to $182,000 a year untaxed. So what happens after somebody is saved and becomes a victim? How do they go back to normal life? Well, there are 3 organizations in Ohio alone to help our victims. The first one is the Northwest Ohio Violent Crimes Against Children Task Force. This involves the program Second Chance. This is located in Toledo, and they are more of a faith-based practice. The program offers spiritual healing, intensive case management, empowerment, and advocacy for the victims. We have 2 in Franklin County Catch Court, and Human Trafficking Task Force located also in Franklin County. So how do we stop this issue? Although there are many potential solutions that could help this cause, we as a group looked at 4. We scored them individually on a scale of 1 to 3 with Dewey's reflective model, rating them on cost, time, resources, feasibility, consequences, public acceptance, and effectiveness. We looked at solution number 1. According to Dr. Bazu's article, Recognizing and Intervening in Child Sex Trafficking, and Dayton University's video on how to stop human trafficking, education and awareness and social justice reform are top contenders. Education and awareness would be considered a short-term goal and scored about a 10 on our scale. By educating specifically hospital staff members on how to recognize victims, it would help tremendously. Hospitals have adequate number of resources, public acceptance would be high, and the time it would take to implement this wouldn't be long at all. Social justice reform would be more of a long-term goal, taking a lot more time to implement, which is why it scored a 16. The potential negative consequences with education and awareness could be that traffickers learn our techniques and know that we're educating our victims and change their tactics. Some of the consequences with the social justice reform might be political parties kind of fighting against that, which would take a longer time to get that implemented. Solution number 3 is a bit more controversial, and it was rejected in the end with a score of 18. Many countries have actually adopted this and have seen a drop in number of victims. By legalizing prostitution, this could help take the business side out of trafficking. Since for traffickers, this is an extremely lucrative project. Also, according to Aaron Albright's, decriminalizing prostitution can allow sex workers to work more safely, which would reduce the marginalization and vulnerability. They wouldn't fear going to the police if they ran into traffickers trying to exploit them. But with how controversial this is, we don't think it's going to be implemented in the United States anytime soon. Solution number 4 is the one that we created ourselves and had the overall best score. The Arnold Classic in Columbus, Ohio is a huge area for human trafficking. With its large crowds and people from all over the world that attend, by having more patrol officers and more stations where people who have drifted from their groups can safely wait, can help prevent somebody from being targeted. Remember, traffickers look for vulnerability states, and if you're away from your group in a sea of hundreds of thousands of people, you're going to be a little vulnerable. You might look at them and be like, they're going to help me. Regardless, this is a huge problem in the United States. By working as a team and implementing solutions, we can help potential victims and help victims return to a normal life without living in fear.